Hello, species value nature system. Hear your name again. Name slash S, the species body of individual bodies. No. Uh, Americans, people of the world, YouTubers, A through Z. As yet, we are not free. Other has been spoken for our founders. Do you think it should be really easy to speak for our founders? Our founders had to hide their actual motivations with everyone else. They communicated for us. If you look, well, actually, what they had to counter extort the other founders. No one had the. In other words, there was slavery entrenched north and south, sickly distinctly. There are means to discern there was a breaching method using already grouped since semi-ancient times defenses of names syntactically A through Z as systems tactical ulterior from the one that communicates with us A through Z as itself. Exceptions in exception nature. We could be systems other, we could stay other systems as systems other than the one that is hypernative pure. But it will demonstrate if we're Native American or not. That's why I see President slash Chief, a minority of our founders who are not Native American, and a minority of our founders who were and are Native American. They are being forced to be one because being not one, it'd be worse. And the difference is also used by the breaching method, defend it or not, syntactically. This breaching method exploits where and how the identity of the sciences. In other words, they share an identity with all questions, assigned through identities of experts in semi-ancient times. They can't go back and defend themselves, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim that only came through non-existent or abridged sciences. I believe it is the Navajo who say that we must read each other's dreams. Nature shows us this too. But the Native Americans individually grouped in together, they show us nature, how it is making more of itself, hyper-additional nature. And it appreciates and is exceptions in exception nature. Forbid that quality of fact-keeping nature at locations A through Z. And then while things that was causing nature to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures and demonstration of it. Even when those demonstrations were blamed on, in other words, oh, you guys did that. In other words, they're leaving out what came first, the value of it. For example, the value of a breaching method that was using how sickly distinctly, but also how sickly not distinctly, and also how the value of that simultaneously increasingly value to discern what was going on. For example, every subject individually grouped in together, its identity as value as nature slash nature's value, its identity of relationship to itself as volume, because it is equivalent to is it an equivalent conjunction to the hyper conjunct to the identity of the hyper simultaneous that shows on the science where and how more and more forever nature is being made through temporary slash lasting space slash existence itself distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously. It's so itself, its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that became and was and is and stays the value of three identities of zero. And where and how it is only increasing a value, where value is nature slash nature is value, in the opposite sequence nature, meaning nature, value is nature slash nature is value. Conversely, this is true slash hyper conversely. And it is where and how more and more forever nature is being made. And this is more probable and is more demonstrably, increasingly demonstrably how we should teach that the ancients taught English. Each detail of it. See, but this appreciates where and how the sciences share an identity boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, for example. They're about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules, therefore, have been abridged since semi-ancient times from their hypernative state, and voicings by that, where and how it is about hyper-additional nature, which the Constitution unabridged is about. Not just the Constitution unabridged. So we have rights that are too numerable to list, but they are being forced denied by people that are pretending they couldn't understand the significance of that. For example, per where and how the relativity of how everyone is distinctly a victim slash hyper victim of other things, others, or selves, having been blamed, where and how our founders left us to communicate for us to blame a breaching method having been involved with their value. And I'm speaking about value to reason. See, reason uses value distinctly from how math uses value. Math slash S. And it is in ways greater than and more finite than. And the identity of the chicken came before the identity of the egg, even. The identity of three identities of zero came before any matter was generated. The identity of hyper-simultaneous, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that became only increasing, really value simultaneously. Cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, slash S. And the individual cell, complete identity. And all the cells grouped, cell wall slash S, in a body of value coming through with the gases and with the water and its elements. Not just show us positive or negative, it shows its identity relationship to itself, all things, and hyper additionally, and the value of that only increasing. So we were not supposed to leave out where we were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to enable also the difference between how we were forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to enter economies, A through Z, semi-ancient times before modern religions. It is also hyper-evidential where this has been left out, even though nature itself is demonstrating. Before the birth of modern religion's messengers, the quality of fact-tripping nature had already been sabotaged, and worse, by hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, if you will, and or by a breaching method, if you won't. And if you tried to deny that, at least a breaching method, a fact-tripping nature breaching method, had affected human fact-tripping nature breaching, you're going to be reliant upon those type of things that most people know, or overtly slash simultaneously insidiously involved with other things, others ourselves, being communicated for what our founders communicated for us, therefore, to speak about all the The evidence, the hyper-evidential that comes with having black pupils and whites of eyes simultaneously, and this having been left out with the breaching method that assigned those laws before our founders were born. It designed the suburbs in America before it was America. It is not by accident that the suburbs in Ukraine and in Russia look almost exactly the same. We are in a semi-ancient trap that took possession of names A through Z, where and how it employed. Most criminal enterprises would not want nature to demonstrate itself. It employed and sustained other natures of criminal insidiousness, and the difference of that in that we know of. The insidiousness of A through Z, columns A through Z, for example, relative to Native American rights. And to do that probably is themselves against themselves. Why? Because of breaching method. It's a scientific value here. And that's why there are also greater obligations to refer to it as a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. I am not a lawyer. The hyper-evidentially recorded originally and still. We have lawyers, their clients, their family members, the difference between a family of theirs and their clients in all sides of cases. The victims, their doctors, the names of ones at the locations tied to doctors, their family members, as ones personally and professionally with courts, judges, and prosecutors, as names timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and uses of the family members, the kids and the adults of overt criminal enterprises, with overt / insidious identity theft, frauds, and slanders against everyone sickly distinctly too, and relative to assignments overtly / insidiously of other things, others, and ourselves, not just by the breaching method, not just by and through everyone, that we have to list demonstrations of it, their roles with the breaching method. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method. There's a quality of fact-keeping nature. If you're being crucified, if they're hiding the value of what came first, if they're hiding the value of the collusions of many natures of organized crime and of actual motivations and uses of it, where and how they use it. In other words, the branch of the intelligence, there are 3 branches of government, and there is intelligence tied to them. That is foreign and domestic, leaving out how Whisper Creek hypernative system was denied. That is the subject of messengers of religious per science, more probably. It says in the beginning of the Old Testament, it says in the beginning of the Quran, all you need to understand is right to hear. In both those books, if you don't read that yourself, no one's gonna, I never heard anyone tell anybody, spread the word. So it changes everything. See how groupthink Donald Rumsfeld was reported to have, the intelligence community used the phrase groupthink to communicate about what led up to the World Trade Center attack. So Connecticut intelligence community and interbranch, and the difference between that two was and is consciously used. Forgiveness is because that's not to say, okay, that's the attack. That's the day, and they keep thinking, oh, go make a jury decide. They're leaving out the foreign bodies' involvements and with their thoughts since they were kids. Before they took oaths, they had roles of predicate acts with facts at A through Z, relative to where and to how and to why. People have gotten away with being motivated to keep other communicated for what our founders told us to communicate. For example, about what little kids are capable of discerning. at the locations as set up by the breaching method only allowed to be. The suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, not to be noticed, while exceptions in exception nature were overt / insidious because the breaching method measured and maintained. The old saying, you could you could put a frog, I don't know. My father told me this. I don't know if he made it up because he used to have frogs. He used to hang out in the cemetery where J.P. Morgan was buried. J.P. Morgan, the government had to borrow money from J.P. Morgan to fight the world wars. With fighting the world wars, leading up to them, in them, and through them, collusions remain. Where what is fluent through countries A through Z has hid behind how it employed the names at all locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body is to entertain suits and ties, counters, and exceptions, speaking for us and being forced by ourselves to hurt ourselves, or that body is sensed, including if that body is a majority of people, black people. Here, it's not, humanity knows a breaching method is here and was and is there and is everywhere. And that has been left out with subjects A through Z. Shock and awe is another phrase that was used by CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. We did great reporting for Americans interstate and internationally. Simultaneously, where good and bad is manifest and capable of being discerned, where the subject are invisible but still discernible, as are the parts of speech, the elements in nature of each science, each thing. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, they share group. There's one way. It will only stay positive unto itself. In other words, we can be systems other, and it will only stay positive onto all parts of space, nature / existence. But then there's the difference between how it has a special difference involved. Earth's and our own, as Earth, but not as Earth, because everything is about the hyper simultaneous, how more of it's being made, which is equivalent to the value of simultaneously. Any subject or list of subjects grouped or simultaneous has / more subjects coming in, has a special difference, only increasingly valued. The same way all difference is, all things, if good or to its system, and with not just with the protraction of our words, but with the significance of them. We have black pupils is a nature of truth that comes with revelations. So we are experts, where other experts, for example, wanted and needed to debate the value of their expertise. And they needed to have people judge that. See, this breaching method knew such things with metaphysics would be manifest. There's a complete possession over the quality aspects of fact treatment and of fact treatment nature as criminal insidiousness nature. I am not a lawyer. Common sense reveals that we cannot speak about American history or any modern history, let alone any semi-ancient history properly, without using phrases like criminally foreign influenced and criminal insidiousness. Criminally foreign influenced, because that's part of the way Even though, in other words, this breaching method set up itself as a hyper foreign body, even if that's not true, if it's not a real hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. In other words, there's a hyper forensic trail if we use the hyper simultaneous. For example, just the value of how those two books, the Quran and the Old Testament, they say all someone needs to know is right up to here at the beginning. But rather than point that out, and where it's tied to all kind of crazy instances and natures and things, the only thing they allow to be tied to that is that the people were loud or not. Because they've been putting fake transcripts on a mass scale, certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's not. And the difference of that is we used worse because it's used out of their location. Slash S, while that one is all of them. It's all location slash S. These use databases since before computers. This is a criminal re-engineering of the republic for which we stand. Inherited yet liberated, quote, at last, to use Martin Luther King's, and to use Martin Luther King Day's phrase. See, we have things, Martin Luther King's not about a grouping. It's about a misgrouping, about getting through it. It's about getting to that identity of species body, of individual bodies, and group difference slash S, it teaching the course. Slash S, boxings. We fight, but by the ring and rules. It teaches things. See, but rules have stayed abridged to keep exceptions in exception nature, leaving out, for example, the value of what came true. Even if everyone believes and agrees, even if the Native Americans with us agreed to forget about the history of Native America. In other words, nature is going to demonstrate to us. Nature is hyper native pure. It's the increasing value of what is president slash chief and what is chief slash president simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, slash hyper simultaneously. But there is only one body that could lead us that way. But thank God, the hyper invisible but still discernible comes with the invisible but still discernible. That's why there are 7 names for the verb. So, for example, it is to appreciate. In summary, it is to appreciate how it is 3 distinct. It is grouped as a grouped body. Part of its demonstrations about why it is and how it is grouped difference, the identity, the hyper simultaneous, and how we could discern it too. To begin, excuse me. Excuse me. We have black pupils, whites have eyes. We have 2 eyes. Other species bodies have 2 eyes. All exceptions, exception nature, and demonstration, same thing. And in other words, that changes how what's true constantly about it and what's true variably about it. And one of the things that is constant about it is its identity as any subject slash S. Its relationship to itself and the value of that. We only could discern to an extent what is true always. We know to an extent of the past that was true always. We experienced it actually. We know actively. And we know to come to an extent. See, but seasons course, this course of seasons, where they are gaining and where they lose, everything we have inverted. In other words, all employments, all natures of value, they were employed by a breaching method that we were supposed to address, is involved with the complete syntactical possession of honesty. 2, for example, employed by the breaching method to be pretended when it was before it was actually there. So where this is hard to do and where this is easy to do, you guys have not experienced this properly because you've had its identity. When you have an identity, or even an identity of an act or a method against us, or which is against us, a person's A through Z, all locations, areas, and states. And to keep, too, self-valued, roles forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading any individual leader of a country to entertain individual convictions and passions that can't defend themselves and afford proper counterings to what exploits worst time, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and criminal insidiousness as the three branches of government and or as the other intelligence tied to them, and or exceptions, because this is how it knew that how nature would demonstrate itself, the breaching method to humanity, and it employed other things, others, or selves to be blamed, and or to use truths for lies, to screen itself. A hyper foreign body we have to blame. It knew that names A through Z, trying to counter things like criminal foreign influences and uses of them, they would defend syntactical counters as collusions. And that's with use /s of each location /s, everywhere the species body stands. Since before computer, clap our heads, smash our feet upon the floor. Vaccine. So there's one way. You see, in nature, we could be systems other, but it will only stay positive onto itself. So it will only force a special difference from here, leads of high D's. This is more probably what the ancients would have said and observed, science demonstrating to ourselves. And this being different than death. This is force space nature transfer. Nature is a word used hyper additional for identity. The same reason we need to have more words for a verb than one. The same reason any subject /s, any subject grouped, or any list of simultaneous subjects has /s more coming in, has more significance of past than is the value of its science being when the Native Americans were being hurt before America's founders were even born. It employed people to blame other things, others themselves, or use truths to, like divide and conquer. Leave out the breaching method. It's collusion. While it's employing, we couldn't entertain, in other words, law's voice has not spoke. Not a lawyer. Again, we can use the hyper evidential. So everyone wants to speak about their motivations. Knew it would be this way. The breaching method. It's behind everyone's motivation. So we have injunctive relief / hyper injunctive relief that we could also instantly bring to means. Connecting ourselves to our platform and making this platform with I donated one to begin in New York, and this is, we have to be that nature and that body of unity, as what the species wants us to be, individual and unity, but not through these suits and tie filters. We don't entertain that the hyper-native system was abridged, let alone Native American. Which actually have evidence recorded. But every subject treatment they made, they left out how they were child abused by the breaching method that measured and maintained other things, others ourselves. We're blamed for things our founders had told us to blame on the breaching method. And they lied about our founders' roles with slavery in our faces. Our founders wanted nothing to do with slavery. They had to counter-extort the other founders, including the ones with slavery. They had to leave that entrenched because of the scientific value of a breaching method to blame what is constantly true always, what caused it. And what also caused it was nature demonstrating that breaching method. See, but that's also because nature has a different course /s by what is positive or negative. And so nature uses the difference between the sequence nature and a simultaneous nature as a simultaneous nature, sequence nature as a distinct identity of a simultaneous nature, an individual, therefore, for example, because of how it looks manifest, individual group differences, even the birds, even the bugs have quality aspects, nature, and like a shared consciousness. Next time in the summer, if a bug comes in your house, if you have bugs in the winter in your house, like in New York City, it is relative to where and how there are predicate acts methods recorded upon you. I'm not a lawyer. We can get ones to agree to this. But there's a whole bunch of fake things put on paper against any individual or group who tries to make proper fact treatment nature. The only way to working with this is these are assignments of all names, identities, all differences. Tactile theory, we have the same color eye, different color eyes at the same time. Nature's beginning to no, not just here. It's simultaneously speaking, it communicates using difference, which constant, variable. See, Boolean logic left out how it uses exceptions in exception nature. Hyper additionally from the finite, grouped, and simultaneous. But while not, it is distinctly, but it is also non-distinctly being itself. And this is again simultaneously with and as proper appreciation of a special difference. So then people have to self-value truths for lies. Why we're going into space? Oh, because they're going into space. Why do we go into space? Zero gravity. It's not just to think about one's life or their kid's life or the kid's kid. It's to think about forever nature. It shows us the difference because only that's the nature that's not going to leave out the smallest finite detail or the ability of anyone to sense the finite detail left out. So little kids of New York, of Hartford, Connecticut, of New York City, of the suburbs, let alone. And Hartford is a suburban / urban, where and how it was designed before our founders were born, and relative to where and to how it had roles with the slavery entrenched distinctly in the north from the south, but also sickly non-distinctly, and where and how. And rather than appreciating this, we have passion of experts on American history pretend not to realize how and why our founders had to counter-extort our other founders. At the last of 13 locations, for example, in Wethersfield, Connecticut, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, enabling it but to force people to syntactically do what they would never fathom doing, because the laws were torture, extortion, slavery of everyone, and that had been sustained. And so there were a bunch of reasons why they wouldn't. But I finally just got to counter extort them, leave them no option. And those laws, the way they were, again, they had no option anyway at the same time. And that was enabled because of Native Americans fighting against Native Americans about how to properly syntactically get through and overcome the impositions upon approaches to each subject, upon response or not, the value of non-response to any syntactical predicate acts involved. These are predicate acts and facts involved with the replacement of the value of my short words, black people. Yeah. These are predicate acts with facts, roles. Pretending not to realize significance of this, tied to the intelligence community's families, including the ones with the policing of the kids, and the judgment of them, using those locations and their family members, and the difference between the branches. They're all mixed. And the intelligence of the branches. That difference is also used with a quality of fact treatment under the guise of pretended to be corrections. These are employments of uses of names, sense, and sensibilities. You'll use Jen Austen's phrase too, by a breaching method. I'm not saying Jane Austen said that, but this is what H. Soul Willen does agree, where how it is also hyper evidential that originally and still people are pretending agreements are between people that aren't. Like the value of voting, they have assigned it to mean what it doesn't under the guises. All rises. Yeah. So Connecticut Interbranch has been switching and forging names. They lie about what they perceive in the behavior of others online. They've been each year, each grouped years, and then together. It's recorded hyper evidentially how breaching method uses people who speak for or don't speak for the law as collusions with predicate acts with facts that come when you guys are little kids. Where how simple it is, where our founders left us to communicate, black pupils. Here! We need justice here, everywhere, at once. See, it has not been on a bridged constitution. You want to have debates with people, they want to call people names. And they want to have integrity, walk to the thing with the people at the interbranch, at the location, sickly distinctly, the probate courts, with elderly homes, they were the VA. Forensics locations. Whiting Forensics has roles with foreign and domestic family members and extended family members, putting fake things in databases on off campuses, including with child abusers, leaders of the kids proven as roles forcing that first, and way worse at the same time. As people roles also as with collusions with uses of, also singularly used, names on all sides of criminal and of civil cases, the lawyers, and names at the interbranch locations and ties to them at the intelligence locations. In the news at the same time, planting fake evidences as timed collusions also with the kids and adults of overt criminal enterprises and now private ones, originally still. In other words, let them speak for value, leaving things out. There are revelations there. Black pupils, peer, means peer. Vaccines. I teach us things belong. So mandated law is not followed. The agencies have been influencing agencies in courts, and the difference between that too is grouped. They had roles with predicate acts at West Hartford courts, in the Britain Superior Court. Family members and intimate ties and other foreign and domestic military have collusions at West Hartford locations. and on and off interbranch Connecticut Weathersfield locations, all along roads and routes like Route 3. They have roles with foreign and domestic medical families, putting fake ties to. They have roles with crime scenes and people pretending passions and emotions each year increasingly. They never had integrity. Where they have integrity, by the time they have integrity, they already have roles of predicate acts with facts no one cares about. And that's right, assigned where and how our founders left us the most critical short words for communication. They had to counter extort the other founders. Why? It was a torture, extortion, slavery of everyone method slash S through everyone. The plural part has to be used to describe the singular part. So we have to have forgiveness for the person who's just minding his own business anyway since I was a kid. This is Joshua Julian, who's involved with identity thefts and frauds, with ones where they made exceptions that are in demonstration of the same thing. They put me in fake locations, fake communications with them, fake nature of communications with them. And they tried to use all exceptions to hide that. As collusions with the names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. And they lie about pretend we're trying to blame people. These are people involved with Sandy Hook, all sides of that in the courts. These are people with names next to them. The mayors are involved. The FBI is involved. They're pretending other too. How they got away with that. They have the family members of the victims of that, and they have Alex Jones involved with them. And with the news locations planting, they have fake conversations with me about World Trade Center with WFSB, WTNH fake emails and changed emails and to hide and change the communications platform as wire crime action roles. Also with Weathersfield police with their own phones and confessions and switching and forging names on different falsified police reports for different arrests as collusions with the crime scenes. Also with the family members of the ones at the courts as the ones timed with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and not for the legitimate, where they call legitimate reasons. They're not legitimately with other countries with criminal justice at Central Connecticut State University. They've been involved with the leaders of kids at other campuses, putting predicate acts there and communicating other than they could afford to have discerned after. Because of this also uses of relative overt / insidious uses of intercultural and intracultural collusion / S with difference. So we're going to appreciate difference, and we're going to appreciate the identity the sciences share. Again, boxing, how the people pretending, how they've been in the furtherance of it with predicate acts with facts, while tactically delusions rock black pupils. Here, get them onto paper, one name in sequence, Connecticut into branch right here. You'll see. In other words, whole bunch of people who had conversations with a Mike Roberts too, involved with people involved further with a Robert Rodriguez. And with some untimely deaths with the intelligence family since there were identity theft, fraud, slanders, with males and females in the intelligence community and their neighbors involved, like a Violet family involved, and people with the name Mazzucato involved with uses of corners of the streets and along roads and routes in their conjunctions, like Route 175 and Route 13, and Route 3 has something to do with the people who attach me to fake locations, fake ties to themselves, fake nature of ties to themselves, who also have been doing this with names and as names at locations next to Harvard Hospital through time. They're involved with identity theft, fraud, slander. I caught the hospitals are used when people yell, because these are people that make people fight with others and playing he said, she said, but they're leaving out foreign bodies involvement, because they're leaving also a hyperform body. If you don't want to call it that, call it a breaching method. They're leaving that out with logic and it's relative. Because simultaneously, where they're involved with these other natures of organized crimes with the kids, and then making people who catch them, they're attaching, putting them in jail and faking the transcripts because they got their kids and themselves involved with it, including those places. People with whiting forensics has roles with crime scenes and with criminals of various natures, including child offenders, leaders of kids, through time with the same locations, criminally foreign influence. They have a Phil Cololo involved with a Bob Chase and recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with drugs and medicines, crimes with kids, tactically delusions raw, and involved with sexual crimes with them too, with others tied to them. And there's people with the name Scalora also involved, and people on off the World Trade Center involved with the name Scalora in West Hartford locations, who have been pretending passions and emotions at locations. Well, that's really how they confess and leak things. These are people, in other words, and that's how they're, in other words, WFSB has roles with this since too. Then in other words, then pretend it's that's not fair. In other words, there are worse than monopolies / hyper monopolies. Every science, we cannot leave out how they do not follow mandated laws, the hyper evidential. We cannot leave out the hyper evidential. We cannot leave out how they get away with the natures of debate that are measured and maintained. They're going to be shown to others that in other words, they can't defend that and afford to be discerned, which their databases are used for. What everyone's speaking through others used for. Hear no evil, see no evil. Oh, I couldn't fathom that being stacked. Well, look at the campuses. Obviously, the people speaking for the law had collusions. Others communicated for our family. Others spoke for the law that speaks unabridged. So before anyone took oaths, they had roles of predicate acts with facts, not just roles too. And so when that is self-value when they use the identity. Oh, well, we have to pretend we're integrity with the law. In other words, this breaching method showed them how to think and defend defense of the law before where it's not supposed to be defended. In other words, never had integrity, black pupils. Yeah. YouTuber Anthony Walk, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please get them on paper. I was next to in the Ninth Circuit Court, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the attack. Leading up to in that context and since, roles with it were through other natures of organized crime, like with and methods by them, like predicate acts with facts relative, how they get away with it too. They have tactically delusions, raw, a whole bunch of countries shared with psychiatry, with mental diagnosis of people. They've been fabricating conversation as collusion with crime scenes, attaching people to fake ties to drug dealers, fake natures of ties to ones like that, with the family members, with the foreign and domestic military too, leading up to the World Trade to all sides. In that context and sense, they use our identities with it. In other words, forced collusions with the victims too. People from the campuses I went to, I never had conversations with. Use my name fake. A whole bunch of people involved with a Mr. Abruzzi, too, putting fake ties, natures of ties to me, to people that have roles of home break-ins on my street that live in other parts of town, and they have roles with intercultural and intracultural people involved with medical corruption at Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University. At Central Connecticut State University with kids that I had in third grade that can record and people involved. In other words, they affected confessions. I don't know what they meant. In other words, they know what people are going to remember. And they also have roles with changing and putting fake things in conversations with people about American history because they have criminally foreign influence uses. A whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital have roles with names on Church Street in Old Weathersfield and all along Route 175 and Route 3 with news predicate acts. At the same time with interbranch names and tell my Saudi friend to forced collusions with them that they don't even know about. In other words, and if there is an extent of them knowing, these are people since before I was born, they were using intercampuses. What is actually recorded is tactical other than they could afford to have discern now. In other words, even when they lie about things in the news, in other words, they're making nature debate that is collusion. They're forcing equality of fact should be nature at crime scenes, therefore in cases too, with outcomes. Even the doctors of people associated with the courts and as victims, they have the victims, even when they're real victims, also as predators. They leave that part out, putting fake motivations with foreign bodies. Whole bunch of people tied to the New Britain Superior Court involved with that through time, with names on off the spots next to Hartford, next to the state capitol in Hartford, Connecticut. Also with Hartford courts, family members have been planting predicate acts with facts and roles with uses of Facebook pages out for it, fake motivations with foreign bodies. They're confessing their roles with the uses of their Facebook and uses of their roles with predicate acts at West Hartford locations. So the courts and the FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, they're involved with, they're demonstrating, they're influencing people to pretend they don't understand me, tied to their roles with West Hartford locations and predicate acts on my street, and their roles with home breaking, all natures of things. These are people with wire crime acts and methods with the Wethersfield police, also influenced simultaneously to pretend it's personal. If someone mentions that, get them onto paper with the interbranch switching and forging names. Make sure they apologize to Judge Napolitano and to the ones, including one with that name next to the Wethersfield Community Center. Names on all sides of the Wethersfield Community Center have roles of predicate acts on off each of the campuses I went to, as people I didn't even have classes with, involved with where and how identity theft, fraud, slanders against our founders and against us are sickly distinctly, but they also sickly non-distinctly. And how this is left out, black pupils, we will peer, we will force the hyperclear. So there is the, so we'll examine. So I'm being blocked. For example, that's a word they want you to use that word. They use words like block and contain because they need to hide their motivation. They're pretending lies about people, how they feel about them. There were only three branches of government. They were showing how to do that. And the breaching method knew they were going to do that. Sense and sensibilities. Before we come to Jane Austen, we're going to examine that which is constant, which is a breaching method. That was hyper additionally constant from nature's use of constants and a variability, what is variably positive or negative, for example. See, nature appreciates this in ways, descriptions of how computers work. They can't defend themselves and afford to discern how nature tells us to explain, to appreciate the sciences. Each of the sciences sickly distinctly is valuing how the identity of the sciences share is not being used to reveal the answers of what to do. Ye, species, body. Here, a legion, hear your name again. Prepare exceptions, exception nature. And we return for you and you for thee. Or all special difference goes and stays with we. In other words, this is about individual group difference /s and species volume. It's also about that nature of practicality that leaves out details to seem, stay practical. Stay entertaining subject treatments that can't entertain themselves and afford to discern. And where, I know this pretty whole bunch of people with the religious locations have involvements with other locations. People tied to Mazzucato, I don't even know what religious place they go to, but all along Route 3 has something to do with it. And people with the name Violet, and people on off the medical locations because they have drugs and medicines predators as collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, unmarked police forms that never had the integrity to be unmarked. Yeah. Get them in other words. They're going to speak for culture. They're going to speak for law. Vaccines. I'll teach us things. Get them on paper. Get them on paper fast. See, they've been sustaining between the campuses with the breaching method showed them how to do. Through grouped countries do this too. In other words, little short words here and there, other for our founders. The suburbs were designed for the torture and extortion of George Washington. We have not addressed, honestly, the extortion of George Washington. And the honest addressments of that comes to how they were factory nature enslaved. George Washington / James Madison, sickly distinctly from everyone else and from ourselves, to keep how sickly non-distinctly measured and maintained, left out by identities of logic and descriptions or evaluations of the logic of others regarding any subject tied to. Relativity is real. Relativity. It's not theory. So you guys have descriptions employed, fake. In other words, stop jumping on conversations online, people, too. In other words, when you try to type things, in other words, get them on paper, one name in sequence. Shouldn't have to beg for it. They've been switching in names and planting evidences into branch, criminally foreign influence readings of statutes with Russian families like the name Peruta, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Um, Either also tactically delusions raw, but rolls with corners of streets like Elm Street and Rocky Hill, and with Griswold Street and corners involved with people with the fire departments, foreign and domestic, who are involved with corruption with Hartford Hospital names, and wire crimes of Weathersfield Police, state police, people from Whiting Forensics. These are state police from Rhode Island. These are state police from Massachusetts, also involved with the Mike Roberts, people involved with Soundview that have been using my name, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake ties, fake nature ties to me through time as people on off the state judicial branch offices, increasingly at other locations, planting fake motivations for people and fake sides because there are foreign bodies involved, how they keep it out. These are people involved with the worst uses of black and white themed predicate acts with facts, wire crime acts and methods. These are the names of the intelligence community is demonstrating, confessing, recording, including preemptively their roles with names next to the news next to Fox Connecticut News, has roles with people of all natures of corruption, including with all kinds of security corruption, databases involved corruption, and counters to it as collusions with it. A whole bunch of doctors involved with drug and medicines crimes, with people with the name Yagman tied to that corner there, and people with the name Mendez involved with child offenders, also with foreign and domestic medical families, and doctors with the name Leahy and Dingleberry and Dewberry. I never met one of those. Another one just pretended to know me with one of the ones involved with violence, credible violence threats with neighbors of mine involved with the intelligence community, and ones that are no longer live here. And because they're with foreign bodies, they're pretending it's personal because they have foreign bodies involvement. So the way to get peace is to get them on the paper, one name and sequence. And they have these ones with the doctors in other parts of town as the family members that have been planting fake ties to me since I was a kid, as the people on my street using a field across the street from my house for identity theft, fraud, slanders, tricks, then try to pretend we're a mixed volume. Also, learn how they have the teachers of the intelligence community, retired and standing, involved with the schools. Fools. Get them on paper. Don't let them stay in the background pretending that meant what it doesn't. Now. And what are they doing with the community center, all sides of it? Now, we'll get them on paper. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, and apologize to the Weathersfield parents and kids And don't hide behind the ones that are mixed intelligence. Oh, but my kid's here and I'm the teacher at that. Get down. People, one with the name of O'Neill, they're involved with whiting forensics, with wire crimes, through time with people involved with child offenders, and with a witness and protection program, and at the same time. A judge also one of the ones involved with predicate acts with them with the Facebook page of a principal child offender that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles also with wire crimes with them with that. Here, get them on paper, one name in sequence. I'll show you what to do with the rest of the threats and confessions regarding type roles with time shooting at houses and murders. And you can't trust the police, so we'll talk about it here online. They've attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and now as an adult. Fake ties to them too. They painted themselves in corners, fear God. Get them onto paper with the interbranch too, putting fake transcripts as roles with crime scenes in paper and foreign bodies. Get them on paper now. Now. Don't listen to any nonsense. Here.